Hello, and welcome to Stories Across Borders. Here we discuss stories told across a range of different mediums, books, movies, games, you name it. The only rule is that we can only talk about things in terms of the writing. Anything like acting, animation, or mechanics is out unless it pertains directly to how the story is being told. I am Daniel Radford, author, Blue Goo, and also your host. And today I'm joined by returning guests, Keith and Andy from the Brockton Bay Chronicles. Hello.
Hi, Daniel. Good to be with you again. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, definitely. Happy to be here.
Yeah, always happy to have you. And today's choice of topic actually comes from you guys. It was your suggestion, and I do have to say I'm very glad you recommended it because I thoroughly enjoyed the show.
Yeah, The Expanse is it's a love of mine, and I'm glad we could turn you on to it.
Yeah, I'm very pleased you did. The Expanse, of course, is the title of show slash book series we'll be discussing today. And I say slash book series because it is adapted from a series of novels and novellas by two authors who sort of cooperate under the shared pen name of James S. A. Corey. For those of you who are not familiar with either version of the story, The Expanse is an epic sci-fi story that primarily deals with the rising political tensions between the United Nations of Earth and Luna, which is what they call the Moon, the Martian Republic, and the Outer Planets Alliance, or OPA, which is a sort of just loose association of various colonies in the asteroid belt and the outer moons of the solar system. And these three powers are locked in a Cold War that is sort of rapidly becoming less cold.
Yeah.
All while this strange and dangerous alien technology is starting to surface throughout the solar system, adding fuel to the fire. And this story is primarily told to us through the eyes of the crew of the Rocinante, who are this sort of ragtag group of misfits from all three places of origin, who just find themselves caught up in this absolute mess of a situation, unwillingly for the most part at first. And they end up playing this very central role in things.
Yeah, that's a good synopsis there. When I'm introducing friends to the show or the books, I kind of tell them that I explain it in terms of okay, humanity. It's in the future. Humanity is expanded out into the solar system, and we've taken our baggage with us.
No, that's good. That's
Nice.
very good.
Yeah, it was funny because I'm the target audience for this thing. It was first on Sci-Fi Channel, the show was, and I didn't have any clue. I mean, we had cut the cord as far as cable went, and so I didn't know anything about it really until it popped up on Amazon Prime, and I started watching it on kind of a whim. A couple of the social media, YouTube type commentator channels I follow had been discussing the Save the Expanse movement. I don't know if you were aware of that movement, Daniel.
I didn't know that it was originally on Sci-Fi until near the end of my watch through, which was yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I had seen the occasional ad for it on YouTube or whatever, and then they were going to cancel it from Sci-Fi, and they had sold the rights to Amazon or whatever. And through a fan campaign and some of the actors being involved, they convinced Jeff Bezos to pick it up, and that's how we got seasons 4, 5, and 6.
I wonder if that situation is actually anything to do with why seasons one, two, and three have just been removed.
You know what? I don't know what's going on there. I've seen on Reddit people talking about that haven't been removed. I've seen it only applying to, there are some people saying it only applied to overseas, like the UK. I've still got it on my Prime, so I don't know. Andy, are you having any trouble seeing it? I mean, how much were you able to get through the show?
I got up through season 4, I think. But yeah, it's still on mine. I have seen the warnings as well. People kind of saying, "Hey, go buy the DVDs if you still have a
Yeah.
DVD player." Uh, and but yeah, it's still alive and kicking on my Prime.
Well, I kid you not, I finished season three, and the next day, seasons one, two, and three were removed from Prime.
Wow, that's
I
bananas.
just made it.
That's cutting it
Well,
close. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've got one, two, and three. I'm gonna definitely get the remainers. I mean, physical media. It's looking like
That
that's
is
the
a
way to
good
go.
idea. But yeah, so to get into the show itself, and you did touch us with your little synopsis there, the idea of humanity entering the space era and taking all of our baggage with us. Because one of the things that I was immediately caught by with this show was the world building
Yes.
because it's very distinct in the way it feels. And part of that is the mechanical side of things, how everything works. And then the other part of that is the human side of things, the human cultural side of things, as it is. Because on the mechanical side of things, it's not quite at the far end of the hard sci-fi side of the spectrum.
Hmm.
It's not quite The Martian where everything is theoretically plausible, but it's getting there. It's definitely a lot more of a realistic and grounded look at our spacefaring future than contemporaries like Star Trek, for example.
Hmm.
Right. And that goes to the fact that as far as the TV show goes, both the writers, Frank and Abrams, were involved in the production of the show, and the executive producer, Nareen Shankar, he was, the three of them together were pretty adamant about making the show as real as possible. As you could imagine, as real as you could get with a television production. So, as it relates to the books, Andy, I presume you're going to plan to read the books at some point.
Yeah, I just finished book two.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I've been working my way through them.
So, obviously you have the freedom to be more what's the word I'm looking for? You can take your time in developing characters and so forth in the books. And so, but because they were involved with the show, I think it was easy to bring it to life, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I liked the storylines that they had to cut out. I kind of understood. They developed some characters more in this on the television side than they were able to on the book side and vice versa. But I loved both mediums.
Yeah, I mean, adaptations are always at their best when the original creators have some sort of input or at least consulted. And you can see
Hmm.
that in the little details in the world building being present. The idea that the limits of physics and the human body are still a factor in travel. The fact
Right.
that gravity and its lack or the lack thereof and its effects on human development are a constant factor in people's lives, when people from the belt or Mars go to Earth, they struggle under the weight of the atmosphere. And
Hmm.
when people from planet side go up into space, they struggle with the fact that everything is zero G now.
Yeah.
Avasarala has to learn how to walk in mag boots and things like that.
As a matter of fact, Andy, let me ask you this, bud. You're in the book too. What are your thoughts about Avasarala at this point, compared to what you've seen in the show?
Well, I have to be honest, I kind of struggle with keeping my mind straight, which I can't read about her without picturing her in the show. And I think they did a really good job of being true to the books.
Hmm.
They talk about how like Holden, for instance, in the book comes across or the book series comes across as more naive than he does in the show, but I can definitely see naivete in Holden in the show as well. And
Yeah.
so it's an interesting byplay between the two media. And I'm always a huge fan of books, and it's hard to capture on the screen, but I agree. I think they did a remarkable job with the TV adaptation.
Yeah.
You talk about Avasarala, and I like to say as much as Robert Downey Jr. owns the role of Tony Stark, Shore Agadoshlu, sorry for butchering her name, she owns the role of Christian Avasarala. And much like you, Bud, when I listen to the audiobooks, I see her. her
Mm.
presence in the character. You know, I hear her voice, even though Jefferson Mays is doing the audio. I hear her voice, and I imagine her character saying these words. It's she was probably the one character I think that translated the best. Now I'm two books further ahead than you are, and I forget if she is. One of the books, she has kind of a reduced role. Her character is not yet there. But anyway,
I heard that a friend of mine who was also very into the show actually sort of was talking to me about it the other day and sort of said that Avasarala's presence in book one is very minimal compared to her presence in
right.
season one of the show. And as far as I can tell, the only reason for the increase like presence she had in season one of the show compared to book one is just that she's really cool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like
Oh, she is.
we need more of her in the show, and I'm glad they did because she is by far one of my favorite characters in The Expanse.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I do love her as an actress and her role as Avasarala. And the other characters, I think, and I may disagree slightly, and this could be because I'm a little further along in the book series. I mean, Stephen Strait gets a lot of grief, I think. Well, maybe not a lot, but he gets some grief for not necessarily being the strongest captain.
Hmm.
I think that Holden in the books may be a little stronger than Stephen's portrayal, but I mean, I'm not denigrating him at all. Let's be clear about that. He does a fine job. I think since you're only at book two, Holden goes to a dark place in book three,
Hmm.
and so I'll be interested to see what you think of that when you do get there.
Yeah, I don't know if naive is maybe the right word, but he's definitely somebody who kind of was groomed, if you will, from a young age to kind of be running a show, running some
Hmm.
kind of operation, and then he's thrust into having to run this just wild kind of out of, well, definitely out of this world, but just a unimaginable. I can't think that at any point in his youth he would think, "Oh, one day I'm going to be flying a ship that's stolen from the Martian Navy, and everybody in the galaxy practically is going to be chasing me at one time or another."
Sure. I think your choice is naive. I'm not going to Yeah,
I mean,
wow.
I
He's
understand.
complex. He's
I would say I do
complex.
understand the idea of not necessarily naive because naive to me
Hmm.
implies a lack of awareness. And it's not that Holden is unaware of the political and moral complexities of the world he inhabits. And it's not like he is unaware of the more duplicitous nature of a lot of the people he is associated with. It's that he is choosing optimism. He is hoping for a better outcome, and he is putting
Mm.
himself and his crew on the line constantly, taking often arguably unnecessarily steep risks in the hope of getting that better outcome.
Interesting. And there is one point in the final episode where your statement will really come to fruition. Actually, the way you just put that, Daniel, I can see, compare it to the final episode of the series toward the very end, where he does just that. He relies on that optimism.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess what I meant was, like taking a section from the second book, they figure out kind of what's going on. They're getting ready to try to take out any remainder of the protomolecule and get Prax's daughter back. And
Yeah.
he's ready to just broadcast out all the information to everybody. And
Yes.
Avasarala is like, that's a really bad idea. I get where you're coming from. I'm all for Freedom of Information Act kind of stuff, but this is just not the way to do it. And, he finally kind of agrees and lets the advanced political operative handle it. He does kind of do an insurance policy by getting some
Hmm.
information to his family. But his first reaction is just, oh, everybody needs to know. And it's like, well, okay, I see where you're coming from, but yeah, that's kind of a simplistic way of viewing this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
So just before we get into it, I completely forgot to do this in the intro, but this should go without saying. Spoiler warning in effect.
Darth
Literally,
Yeah.
Vader is Luke's father. Yeah.
wait, what?
I
Literally,
always wondered. Oh,
just
go ahead.
before I
Sorry.
was just saying, just before we got into this, just before hitting record, I was like, yeah, don't worry, I'll make sure I say this intro, and then completely forgot to do it.
I'm gonna take blame for that 'cause I let my enthusiasm for the show and the books get myself rolling, get my motor running, and I just take off discussing this thing. Andy, there is going back to the point you brought up about Holden and Avasarala. I'd forgotten about that moment where she's trying to talk him down from broadcasting all that information due to the insanity of it at that moment. There is a point in season 5 where Holden is with a couple of characters. I'm not going to try to be too spoilery for you, and he's looking at a video feed. He has a device in his hand. He pushes a button on and it brings up a video feed. And one of the other characters asks him, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "I saw a button and I pushed it." And the guy responds, "That's just how you go through life, isn't it?" That is so Holden.
Definitely. Yeah, there's some things there where you're just like, all right, I get that, you're just gonna poke and prod and try to figure things out, but some buttons should not be pushed. I'm just
Right,
just
right.
saying.
Well, see, this is one of the things I really, really like about The Expanse, and this may turn into a bit of a spiel, fair warning, but so there is moral complexity and then there is emotional complexity, and it's very
Mm,
easy to conflate the two. But moral complexity is your straight up, is this right? Is this wrong? Is it the gray area? It is the more logical side of that. It is a semi-objective view of things because obviously morality isn't 100% subjective, objective, but it is a somewhat objective view of things, right, wrong, gray area. Whilst emotional complexity is how the characters feel about that morality and the impact of their decisions on the world, on their relationships, on themselves, and
Mm,
it's how they sort of wrestle with the consequences of their actions and the sort of morally complex side of things of their decisions. And The Expanse has both of those things in spades. You
yeah.
know, there are very few characters in The Expanse who are outright evil. There are a few, although they would probably argue they are not. But
Yeah.
just about every character is doing what they believe is right for themselves, for their people, for humanity at large. And unfortunately, this often leads the various prominent characters and factions to be in conflict with each other. Even the Rocinante crew, even their direct allies like Miller and Bobby, they are just as complex. All of them, or just about all of them, have done things that are dubious at best and immoral at worst, but typically for
Hmm.
reasons that are arguably noble or compassionate. And then on the emotional side of that, because there is that distinction of moral and emotional, they then constantly are left to wrestle with those choices, both historical, personal histories, things they've done in the past before the show, and things they've done in the present, and their own personal beliefs and values and loyalties and all that. And it becomes a question of not only the morality of their actions and the practicality of their actions, but also, do I care about that in the
Hmm.
face of my personal values? Which is very interesting.
That's a good point. Yeah, there is, when you lay it out that way, I see a lot of that in Naomi's character in the television series. Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah, and I see that same kind of thing with Bobby.
Hmm.
She's definitely got, she's on a mission, and then Avaslara kind of shows her maybe a different route to go, and she really struggles with, but I'm anti-Earth,
Right.
I don't know how to cope with this, but she realizes, all right, wait, this isn't a tangential way to get to what I want. Avasarala is also trying to stop the proto molecule and the monster as it's called. And And so Bobby gets on board with it, but it's a constant. She's always wrestling with that.
Yeah, those two are both very good examples because, it's as you say, Bobby is, she's basically indoctrinated into the Martian military. Her
Mm.
whole family
Correct.
have served, have been Marines. She has been
Hmm.
trained for years specifically to be prepared to fight Earth at any moment. The belt's barely a factor.
You're right.
And all of a sudden she finds herself in a situation where her government, Mars, try to keep a situation and the reality of it very hush hush for their own benefit. And Avasarala, representing Earth, is trying to bring this into bring this out into the open to an extent and deal with it in a different way that is more aligned with Bobby's morality. And so she's forced to choose between her loyalty to Mars and her personal beliefs regarding the
Mm.
situation. And then you've got Naomi, who is a very different sort of example, the same thing, because she's for the first half of the show especially, we don't know that much about her history or anything like that.
Mm.
Right.
We know she's had some loose ties to the OPA,
Hmm.
and that's about it. She doesn't like Fred. And
No.
later on, we come to understand that the reason that she is so, I guess, pro morality, what I'm getting at. She's very much the
Hmm.
group's
Mm.
conscience a lot of the time, but we learned the reason she's like that is because she has been brought into extremism herself at a younger age, and had her life shattered because of the extremist of people in her life. People like Marco, who
Hmm.
obviously Andy probably doesn't know yet, and like Fred, who in a lot of ways reminds her of Marco. And it's not just them. Just to say, it's not just them. Amos is another really interesting example of that sort of situation. And he's had a very unclear the exact nature of all of his upbringing. Uh, through
Yeah,
it
there's a
never becomes
novella.
super clear, but
There's a novella I believe called The Churn, which gives Amos's backstory. There's
okay.
I want to say there's like four or five different novellas. One covers Bobby, one covers Amos. I forget what the other couple are. I really I've gotta finish the series
I mean, there's a lot of books.
the books and then
I think
yeah,
there's like
and
20
then get
total,
on
including
those.
the novellas or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
You- There was something I didn't really appreciate Miller, I think, early on, especially my first watch of the show. I think reading the books helped me appreciate what Thomas Jane was bringing and how, he brought more of an edge to the TV show than I got from Miller, the detective in the books. Does that track with you as well, Andy, or no?
I didn't actually read book one. I jumped right into book
Okay.
two. But in the
How?
show, yeah,
How
he
did you
seemed to
do
have.
that?
Well, I had watched the show already,
I
so
guess.
I just figured out where it was. But I went with the one that was free on Kindle. So,
There you go.
um, but yeah, so I didn't really notice that. Just watching the TV show, he seemed kind of edgy, but he also just seemed a little lost, just kind of looking for something to give him a direction.
Hmm.
Um, and that might go back to, kind of what we were touching on earlier, where so much of the stuff going on caused people to feel with kind of without an anchor. It's like, all right, well,
Yeah.
I want to support this group, but they're messed up over here. I want to try to align. I'm definitely, I'm living in the same environment as this group, but I don't like what they're doing either. And so it's hard to know how to align yourself. And so you look for some kind of cause to latch onto.
I really like that summation of Miller, this idea that he's less edgy and more lost, because I can see why
Mm.
because you can see a little bit of that sort of grizzled noir detective influence in there, which I think is where some of that edge comes from. But
Hmm.
he does strike me as someone who is living a pretty crappy life on in the belt, as most belters are, who is just trying to get by and keep a very fragile peace, stop everyone from killing each other, basically. just trying to get by.
Yeah.
And then suddenly this purpose falls into his lap, you know?
Pretty much. And in the show, it's he's cut off at the kneecaps pretty dramatically, as opposed to in the books. I think one of the points I was going to make was this is probably a case where I think it did me a service to have watched the series before I dug into the books, because I think it allowed me to appreciate what the showrunners and the directors for each episode, what they were trying to bring out of the characters. And I grew to have an understanding of who they were prior to the more detailed description and of who they were in the book. So for me, it kind of worked out better that way.
That's fair. It depending on the order you do things, I mean, not always, but it is often interesting to do a compare and contrast like that and sort of go, oh, okay, this is why they were doing that. This is why they were doing that. This is how this converted to this and vice versa. It can be very interesting to see the same story play out in different mediums. So
Hmm.
I do agree with that. That usually, obviously, because you have a lot more space in a book, no pun intended,
Ah,
you can really get to the finest details of a character, whilst in an adapted format, even a fairly long form TV series like The Expanse ended up being,
mhm.
you do get a more distilled version, right? It's less you're getting an exact one-to-one translation and more like you have book Miller and then you have essence of Miller.
Sure. And yeah, you gotta understand that as a fan when you're gonna check out both mediums, whether you're checking out the Expanse book and television show, or Lord of the Rings books versus epic movies.
Oh, I could
They're
get into that.
yeah, for sure.
I have a lot of feelings about Tolkien's writing that would make tend to make me quite unpopular in fantasy circles.
Well, I'm a noob, so hey, you could just blow it on by me. But I was gonna ask Andy. So, okay, so you've got book two underneath your belt. You've got a feel for how some of the space travel went. Did you appreciate how they used elements of things like the light delay for conversations and waiting for data to transmit from the outer systems? Obviously, in the books, it may take the Rossi 3 days to go from Titan down to Jupiter versus in excuse, did I say that right? Yeah, in the book it'll take longer to get there, and in the show they do what they can to pay service to it. Were you okay with the effort they put into it?
Yeah, I thought they did a really good job of that. And it wasn't like overt where, you're just staring at a black screen with something barely moving for 5 minutes, but
Hmm.
there were just elements that really brought it home. And they do a great job, I think, of then transitioning when they recognize that the protomolecule is doing instant communication.
Hmm.
And it really hits home where you're like, yeah, wow, we've been used to all these delays and just having to kind of fire and forget, and then later on you get a response at some point if the signal gets through all the relays and everything okay, and then all of a sudden the oh wait a minute, the exact same time that happened, this happened. What's up with that? That freaks everybody out. I think that really hits home with everyone that they're kind of, uh-oh, this is something that's off the charts here. We're
For
way
sure.
behind the curve here. But yeah, I thought it did a good job. The one thing that I always get hung up on in space shows, and I get why they do it, but it's like, man, I see the back of the ship and I hear the engines. What's up with that?
Yeah, they what did I hear?
Oh, here's
I
a
think season t
sorry, I just had a thought, right? I mean, the issue with that is that sound doesn't really transmit through the vacuum, right?
right.
Right.
But theoretically, if you were on a ship, like on the exterior of the ship, there is something for that sound to vibrate into. I wonder how that play.
Sure.
I wonder if that would change things. Just
Well,
completely off the
I
top of my head, I'm like, hmm.
now I can get it if you're in the interior or if you're on the hull, okay, and you've
Yeah, but
got your fusion core vibrating through your mag boots. Yeah, I can get that. I mean, we've seen instances in the show where two characters in the vacuum will put their heads together, their helmets together, and their speech will
Mm.
transmit through that. So yeah, I'm okay with that. But to Andy's point, I think yeah, occasionally we're trying to go for that real science sci-fi feel. Okay, maybe we have to put up with sound as kind of a well, all right, yeah. Well, there's no engine sound in space, but okay, it is just a show. As you would say, Andy, press the believe button.
I like
Exactly. Yeah.
that.
But on the flip side, I can still remember, I think it was oh, what the heck was it? 2010 Space
Hmm.
Odyssey. Not
Yeah,
2001, but
2010. Yeah, the one with Lithgow and
yeah, where
Roy
he
Schreider.
he does like heavy breathing in his helmet, and that's all you
Hmm.
hear for like
Yeah,
it seems forever in the movie, and you're just like, oh my gosh. I know, I get it. There's no other sound, but
yeah,
still, this is getting
yeah,
old really fast. So there is a fine balance.
I I
for
think
sure.
there's a difference between like a literal translation of world to fiction and authenticity, right? Where
Hmm.
something doesn't have to be a perfect representation of reality or whatever to be authentic in how it feels and looks and things like that. A creator that I quite enjoy went over a very long spiel about this sort of thing in regards to like historical locations in video games and things like that. But I think the same thing does apply to sci-fi and real world physics. And
Hmm.
I think it's okay to bend the rules a little bit for the audience experience as long as what you get is that authentic, believable vibe, especially when you're dealing with a much more gritty, grounded type of sci-fi like The Expanse. Obviously, in something like Star Trek or Star Wars, you can hand wave a lot more.
Precisely, and I think just precisely because of the way you phrase that, I think as a fan, I'm willing to accept more because they are making that effort for me. You know, I like to say also that physics is kind of an uncredited co-star in this show. You know, the showrunners are making the effort to give me as real a translation of physics in space as it could be. So I'm going to accept that they do have to bend the rules somewhat to tell the story effectively in the visual medium.
Yeah, and to be fair, that does also work to their advantage in a lot of ways, right? Because
Hmm.
the things that break our understanding of physics are just as confusing to the characters in the story as they are to us, the audience, where we're looking at stuff like instant communication in the proto-molecule and
Yeah.
stuff with the ring and things like that. And we're like, this
Hmm.
makes no sense. This is not possible. And the characters in the show were also going, this makes no sense. This is not supposed to be possible.
For sure. To that end, also, so you've both gotten through season, yeah, the battle with the proto-molecule monster at the end of season two, was it? No, I forget where the creature was crawling on the hull of the ship, getting ready to attack Prax and Naomi. You guys remember that, right?
Oh
Yes.
yeah, that
So
was
that's a
great.
case where those guys are out there on the hull on mag boots, and this creature is, I'm going to presume, using some kind of self-generated gravity field to walk around on the exterior of the ship. So that's a case where, yeah, us and the characters both are going, "What in the world is this creature doing?" You
You know, I always just assumed it was just clinging to like pieces of the ship, but now that
know,
you mention it, that yeah,
no
there's no
claw marks.
claws.
Hmm. Now, in the book, that battle, of course, is more detailed. People get hurt, and it's actually more terrifying because it is more detailed.
I suppose it's got proto-molecule in it. Maybe it's producing a magnetic field.
Who knows?
Yeah.
As we say, us and the characters both kind of scratch our chin, going, "Well, that's peculiar," you know.
I mean, yeah,
So,
I mean, that's the thing though. They basically never explain anything of how the alien technology works compared to the very grounded, hard sci-fi approach that they take towards the human technology. And that contrast is great. It's fantastic. Not explaining anything ever actually works in their
mhm.
favor because it makes the technology of the proto molecule feel more alien and incomprehensible.
Yeah, I agree with that, Andy. You're going to definitely need to get. So, if you've gone through season 4, where they've gone to Illis, I
Hmm.
really want to hear what you think of that book. Um,
Okay.
Again, I apologize for repeating myself on the obvious fact that they have more ability to draw out the journeys of the characters in there versus the television show. Some people, I think, Daniel, what do you think? Do you think there's a kind of a let off in season 4 versus the earlier seasons?
Um, Not exactly. I wouldn't say that. I think it's still just as interesting and intense. It feels different because there's a shift in focus. It is one of
Hmm.
the least, even the political stuff is still very much in play on Illis, but the overarching political narrative, it's the only place where the only time, the only season where I feel like that takes a back seat to
Mm.
focus more on the proto-molecule itself. The only, which to be fair, this does come off the back of a very weird time skip in the middle of season three. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah. What was that kid's name? Maneo Zhang Espinoza, the kid who went through the
Hmm.
ring.
Right.
Yeah, there's your physics for you right there.
oh,
That was grim.
Man, that's the first time I watched that. And yeah, grim for sure, but I kind of was like, oh yeah, 'cause that's what would happen. You're like, oh God, that was great. And its awfulness.
it's also really interesting because it's an interaction between the real world physics of inertia and the
Hmm.
completely mind-boggling ability of the protomolecule science to manipulate physics and inertia.
Yeah, yeah,
There was
it's
a
really good stuff.
horrible
Go
joke
ahead.
like that I remember as a kid where this guy is going to a spaceship dealership and he's looking at the hottest new model and the salesman is talking about how fast it can go and it can just stop on a dime and
Hmm.
the prospective buyer says, "What happens then?" And he says, "Well, then a spatula comes out of the dash and scrapes you off the inside of the windshield."
And I
Bro.
get to sell it again.
Right.
Nice. Um, the I will say this about the Expanse. Now, the show does make an honest effort to give us good space battles. I mean, frankly, the Expanse TV show has ruined me for other sci-fi space battles. But again, the in the books you get the 3 or 4 hours of delay between the Martian gunship firing the missile at you, and the vectors are such that you're going to have to sit there and watch for 3 or 4 hours before this thing finally comes in and destroys you, and that
Mm.
just kind of because the death of the Canterbury was not instantaneous in the book.
Mm.
That conversation between Holden and his girl took a lot longer, and there was nothing they could do about it because the vectors were such that they were going to die.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of those things that would be not impossible to translate to the TV medium or film or what have you, but they could only dedicate so much of a limited runtime to the Canterbury's
Yes.
destruction because that's the inciting incident. They can't spend
Mm.
half a story
Yeah.
on it or half an
It,
episode or
it,
whatever.
exactly. And because, as I said, because they bought goodwill with me in their attempt to be faithful to the reality of space travel, I accept it. And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, well, they didn't see that coming. A ship full of people, boom. And that's what sets it all off.
Right.
Yeah. killing a bunch of people is definitely an interesting way to start a story. I would never do. I've done that. Literally how my book opens. But it does set the tone for like what you can expect going forward. In that
Sure.
things are going to be complicated and they're going to be rough for the characters involved. And things tend to go surprisingly well, all things considered, for the crew of the Rocinante. But I like the fact that in universe, this is acknowledged that they should be dead.
Oh
Hmm.
yeah. Oh yeah. And one of the characters in one of the later seasons says that. It's like, you guys are lucky to be alive. And Naomi kind of laughs at it as she kind of repeats it along with that character. It's like, yeah, you guys
Yeah,
should have been tore up and left out float on the float for a long time.
yeah, like they are the epitome of a group of people who are simultaneously the unluckiest and luckiest people alive.
Hmm.
They constantly, without really wanting to be involved, find themselves involved in the worst situations, just the absolute worst possible things to be stuck involved with. And they manage to just scrape by every time with minimal losses.
And it is kind of a running gag through the series where every now and again a character will point out to Holden he's at the center of everything all the time. And you're standing around going, who, me? And that's just kind of Holden's MO throughout the show.
He's like, yeah, I know, it sucks. I don't know why, and I hate it.
I do like one storyline that they do have the opportunity to let play out, and that's okay. So Andy, you've got through book four, so then you've met Prax and May, and you
Yeah.
saw how that all played out. So that his journey to find his daughter, I mean, it's not exactly the Iliad, but this guy, it's bad for Prax. I mean, the moon is destroyed practically when the mirrors fall, and there's actually orbital bombardment and so forth. And this poor guy, he's on the verge of starvation when he meets up with the crew of the Rossi, and that I really wish they could have had time to develop that a little bit long. I mean, well, yeah, I wish they could have, but I can understand why they didn't. They paid as much service to that storyline as they could.
Yeah, I really liked how because of Prax's background, he, you know, really had insight into how bad things were earlier than just about anybody. He was seeing that, as he called it, the cascade of failures, and how each system is built with redundancies and things to try to keep it going if one unit fails or a particular component
Hmm.
breaks down. But you had all these different things breaking. And so the failure tree, if you will, just gets so broad that he sees it coming from a mile away. And so not only is he starving to death and struggling each
Hmm.
day to try to find his daughter, but he knows how bad it is. And then it's not going to get better. Nothing is going to fix this. It's unfixable. And it was really intense for me to go through that. And you're right. In the movie or in the show, it's not quite as evident, but in the book, they really hit it hard.
Yeah, I forgot you book two. You've done book two. Let me ask you before you. I'm sorry to step on you, Dan, but I
Oh, go
wanted to
ahead.
get this question from you guys with regards to the brutality that they were not afraid to show in that scene where we meet Prax and they space the inners.
It says a lot about the situation that the solar system is currently in, right? It's the perfect example of it. The Belters are like, we have like no resources to spare. Like hell are we going to give it to you guys who are,
Hmm.
effectively who are Earthers and whatnot, because you guys are a big part of the reason we are struggling to survive. There's just no way. And
Hmm.
Yeah,
it's brutal, it's cruel, it is unjust. These are innocent people. They are not responsible for the situation. But it is effectively very early setup for the Free Navy conflict in later seasons. It's
Hmm.
showing how the belt feels about the inners in a very specific way. This idea that it doesn't matter if they're effectively innocent, they are a part of the system that has been causing us all this problem. We cannot spare our limited resources on them.
Hmm.
Right, and whether it's in the book or in the show, I mean, the plight of the Belters is given just service, I think. They aren't just cartoon characters, ghetto trash. They've got a beef. They've got a beef with the inners, and you have to pay attention to it. Otherwise, you end up with Marco and Naras.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's very well set up, this tension from the very
Yeah.
beginning, right? With the way Fred feels about everything and how his people feel about him, with the conflicts on the Rocinante about, where do we align ourselves and things like that. And someone points out, I can't remember who exactly it was. It might have even been Abasarala. I don't think it was. No, maybe
Mm.
Drummer? I don't know. I can't remember who it was, but someone basically pointed out that the rise of someone like Marco was inevitable
No, it was
because
Holden.
oh, it's Holden?
It wa-
Okay.
it was Holden at the
At that
okay,
very
a little bit of
important meeting.
yes, with Andy has to look forward to.
Yeah.
Holden makes that point that he was a monster, he was wrong, but
He wasn't all
he was an
wrong.
he was almost inevitable. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, if it wasn't him, and yeah, Daniel, maybe it might have been. Did Drummer say something like that?
She might have been, but yeah,
Huh.
someone does basically say that the rise of someone like that was inevitable because of the injustices perpetuated by the Martians and the Earthers on the belt. Like, of course, if you oppress people long enough, someone is going to rise up and take volatile action in response to that oppression. And yeah, it's not this. It's the equivalent of a tantrum. It's not
Hmm.
actually going to fix anything because the situation is way more complicated than that. But your actions invite violence by virtue of being oppressive.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Speaking of Drummer, she actually is an amalgamation of a couple of characters, from what I
Oh,
understand. So apparently, Kara G, I mean, she was kind of a bit player originally, but the showrunners loved her and they kept giving her more storylines. So I want to say she's kind of an amalgamation of Michio Pa and some of
but
um,
Michio is a character in the show.
yeah, but that's not
Huh.
the same. That's not the same one. So
Interesting.
drummer has more of her and Ashford, a little bit of Ashford's storyline, and I want to say somebody else. But your listeners could correct me. I believe she's like two or three characters kind of blended into this version that Kara G portrays, because the writers, Daniel and Ty and Noreen loved her, and they're like, yeah, give her this to say, give her this to say, give her this storyline. And yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, she does seem like a bit player at first, and then her role just expands more and more and more until she becomes like integral to the political narrative. And she is a
Hmm.
very interesting character because she's representing not at all a moderate faction, but
Oh no.
a moderate place in the spectrum of Inner to Belta, where she's like, yeah, no, like Marco has a point.
Hmm.
Everything he is saying that you guys have done is correct, and
Hmm.
that has to change. You need to give us the respect we are due, but I don't agree with him destroying humanity to do it, basically.
Yeah, now she is a partisan and proudly so, but yeah, she's not a megalomaniac like Marco.
And she has a lot more emotional depth to her than I would have expected, right? She at one point
Hmm.
says to her crew, I don't love you guys because you're fighters. I love you guys because you're builders. And I thought
Right.
about that and I was like, from moment one, when we've met this character, she has surrounded herself with builders.
Mm. Huh. Really? Hmm.
Fred is a
Hmm.
builder.
Yeah, yeah.
He's not a mechanic or an engineer or a salvager or anything like that, but he is trying to build something with Tycho Station and make and a politicized Belter nation.
True.
Naomi is a builder. She's literally an engineer who her job is to make things and build things. Her crew were salvagers and mechanics and effectively builders. She constantly surrounds herself with the people who are the antithesis to her in a lot of ways because she is through and through someone who tears shit down.
Yeah. 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 Andy, Miller's journey through series. Your impressions of his book journey versus the show. Again, time constraints and so forth. It was more of a, I thought it was more of a house of horrors. Would you agree with that in the book?
Yeah, yeah, I think I'd agree with that. It's the TV show though, definitely was was horrible enough for me. And I don't know, again, the two kind of blend a little bit, when you've done them both.
Hmm.
And so it's hard to know, for me at least, to tease out which was there, am I having this feeling because I remember what was going on in the book, so I can kind of project into what Miller is thinking, or is it actually being portrayed on the screen? But yeah, I there's kind of just this morbid fascination going on as well, and then the drive to, you know, keep trying to figure out what's going on, just his detective nature.
Yeah. And yeah, the relationship, and I think this might go on to what something Daniel touched on, Julie becoming his guiding, his North Star was an interesting journey, I thought. But in on the TV show and in the book.
Yeah, I mean, it was Andy who brought it up first that a lot of these people like Miller seemed lost. A lot of people in the show sort of are
Mm,
lost until they find their purpose. But yeah, that was Miller's a lot of Miller's journey was he started as very lost, just trying to get by and survive and keep the peace as much as possible. Then it gets wrapped up in this Julie case and something about her determination to make a change for the belt, despite being an Earther, just resonates with him.
yeah,
So it makes something click. He becomes basically just borderline obsessed with this woman and her journey and getting to the bottom of all this. Finds his purpose in getting to the bottom of this situation of her case, and then what's left after the Ceres incident is still doing that.
Mm.
yeah, yeah. The detective,
The detective and Miller, who are not necessarily the same, or the
or
investigator, I think,
the
who are not
investigator. That's what.
necessarily,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
not necessarily the
Mm.
same entity.
Right. Yeah.
One of them is trying to sort of manipulate Holden into doing things it wants, and the other one is trying to pull Holden in the more correct direction.
Right. Well, these guys had me from word go. I mean, as with most people, I think episode 4 of season 1 is is what brings you in, for sure. But the as far as the books go, I think the political aspect of it, much as with Game of Thrones, I never imagined that Game of Thrones would be something that would drag me in, but the politics of what was going on got me, just like with The Expanse.
That makes a lot of sense because one of the writers for The Expanse used to work with George R. R. Martin.
Right. That's
Yeah.
that's true. I forget which one of them it was, but you're right about that. But yeah, the politics of the show going on, that was cool. And then we on top of that we have some kick butt space flight. So yeah, I'm a happy camper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in on the political narrative. I love that stuff. It is typically my favorite part of a story like this, and they absolutely nailed the like political tensions with Earth and Mars, the whole
Hmm.
reason things go like a lot of it mirrors actual historical conflicts and
Mm.
fights for independence and the aftermath of that in actual reality. And I really enjoyed that the introduction of the proto molecule didn't
Yeah.
didn't shift focus other than some time in season 4 didn't really shift focus away from the political narrative. Instead, it just added fuel to the fire.
Right. Yeah, it was you still had the inners and the OPA at odds with each other. And then it became, okay, which one of these monkeys is going to pick up this big stick here and use it against the others?
And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I've said this in every other episode in this cycle so far, and I'll say it again. Sci-fi is always at its best when it is using its more sci-fi futuristic elements to emphasize human nature and human flaws and
Mm,
that human storytelling. And The Expanse is so good at that. The
I
moral and
agree.
emotional complexity, the flaws of the characters, the wider political situation and how the proto-molecule fits into that. You can see that, and you look at our society today, and you go like, "Yeah, I see how we got here."
Yeah. 100%. Yep.
Your summation
100%.
of humanity goes to space and takes their baggage with them is just the most perfect one sentence summation of the Expanse.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I am genuinely so mad that it was cancelled at season 6.
Well,
Hmm.
yeah, Amazon. I don't know what they were thinking. They had a winner here. Now, to just so you, I don't know if you're aware, forgive me if you're already aware, there is an actual time skip between this book and the next. I want to say it's like 30 years.
Yeah, that
Oh,
sounds
So
right.
in theory, if they wanted to, they could have kept going, maybe age up the actors, throw some makeup on them, whatever. But yeah, I was disappointed with this show ending after season six.
I mean, it would have been easy enough to just not do it as a 30-year time skip, to be honest, and just add a couple years at most if they absolutely needed to,
Hmm.
because the things with Laconia were ongoing during the Marco conflict, you know. But
Right.
I will say, like, the major political narrative of everything going on across seasons 1 through 6 did come to a satisfying conclusion. I was pleased with that.
I agree.
That was the main story as far as I was concerned. So I'm okay with that. They did not end at the worst possible point. They had a good and satisfying story. However, there was very obviously further proto-molecule alien story that was very obviously being set up. I mean, without saying
For
too much,
sure.
they had their whole pet cemetery thing going on.
Bro, yeah. Oh, you got to get there, Andy.
Yeah, so there's clearly more there, and I know for a fact there's I believe 3 other novels that were not explored in the show, and I get it, right? Especially knowing there was a time skip of 30 years to contend with in theory as well. It is difficult for a long epic sci-fi story to find a home and develop an audience because there is a lot
Hmm.
less of a market for it than more grounded dramas or comedies,
Yeah,
and also compared to like epic fantasy, high fantasy, that sort of thing. And on top of that, a lot of the like people who are invested in sci-fi generally gravitate to like 1 or 2 of the big franchises, Star Trek, Star Wars, Doctor Who, Stargate, whatever.
right.
So it is hard sometimes for a somewhat more niche uh property to have that sort of staying power in the long term as an epic sort of long time, long spanning story. So I do get it. It is hard. It's also hard to get people from outside this like general sci-fi fandom sphere as well to give sci-fi stories like The Expanse a chance anyway, because they have
It's
some
very
very
true.
preconceived notions about what sci-fi is. They aren't thinking intense politics and
Hmm. You
deep
you
human
don't look at a
drama.
right. You don't look at a spaceship firing off missiles and think, okay, political drama.
Yeah,
No,
they
you don't tend to make that association off the bat.
yeah, people see that and what they hear sci-fi and what they imagine is Twi'lek slave girls and space dogfights and shallowness,
Yeah.
which isn't even
Mm,
entirely
yeah.
fair to, it's not even fair to the franchises that spawned that statement, but you know, so
Mhm.
I understand why all of this makes for numbers that aren't as juicy as producers and networks and distributors would like, even when the media itself is very highly acclaimed and has a dedicated fandom. And then you factor in a 30-year time skip and how that would play out with different actors
Yeah.
and effects or whatever. And I understand why The Expanse ended up not going past its 6 seasons, especially when the political narrative did reach a conclusion.
Yeah.
But I'm
So
still annoyed because I wanted to see what was going on with the proto molecule.
for sure. Andy, we got to do some watch alongs there, bud.
That
Do a
sounds
watch
good.
party. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
So we'll have to set that up.
Yeah, you definitely should do finish this, and when you finish it, Andy, let me know what you thought because I would be very curious to hear your opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I'll do that. I I've been a sucker for sci-fi as long as I can remember. I was trying to think back before the show, and my uncle worked on the Lunar Rover project at Boeing, and
Oh
so
wow.
Okay,
one
that's
of the
cool as
early
hell.
yeah, one of the earliest posters I had, quote unquote, was a framed picture of the Earth from the moon, that composite picture. And it's
Hmm.
probably, 4 foot long, 2.5 feet high or so. And I just remember looking at that as a kid and thinking, wow, if I could just go to space sometime, that'd be so cool. So I'll watch anything space related. I mean, I can still remember watching Space 1999 and thinking,
Oh yeah.
this is this is horrible, but I'm going to keep watching because it's in space.
You didn't like Space 1999 as a kid?
Oh my gosh, no. It was
Dude, that was
just
my jam. Are you kidding me?
seriously? Oh.
Yeah. Hey, look here. Well, okay, all right. So we both grew up in towns that had like three TV stations. I got
Good
lucky that it
point.
came that it. Did you see it young? Did you see? Sorry, Daniel. I gotta
No,
argue
no,
with my buddy
I'm
here for a second.
enjoying this.
Did you see Space 1999 when it aired, or did you catch it later when we were in college or toward that?
No, I saw it when I was young, but I had also seen Star Trek, and you had these ships that were zooming off and
Hmm.
disappearing in a twinkle of light, and
Hmm.
phasers and all this stuff, and then you flip around and you got the guy who was on the Mission Impossible show somehow now on the moon driving this thing that looks like it's going to fall apart at any minute. It's just like, wait a minute, this is
Okay.
lame.
For as long as we've been friends, we haven't had this debate. Okay, another time, next time we talk, we're gonna have to discuss
All
this,
right.
bro.
It could be your next
All right.
podcast.
Anyway, sorry, Daniel.
No, you're good. I'm saying, to be fair, the whole thing, everything falling apart thing, actually lends a lot to atmosphere in sci-fi. I've come to the conclusion of because
There
everything
is that.
it's part of the reason that the original trilogy of Star Wars is so charming is that everything is always broken. And also one of
Yeah,
the things that makes the Rocinante so charming is that there's always holes in it.
Mm.
that's true. That's very true. What did you guys think of that first battle when they went to the station? Um, to go investigate what was going on that station. Where this is the first time we saw the Rossi get holed like that, and Alex was flying in and weaving in and out of the structure to stay safe. How'd you guys like that battle?
I liked the attention was paid to the fact that damage to the ship is a real thing in this series and it matters and
Hmm.
they have you see that they have to fix it or they're not going to have oxygen to breathe. I really like that attention to detail and this like that added tension that comes from the stakes of the damage being present and mattering.
Andy?
Yeah, that was a great scene, but I actually like the one where they get hit and Brax is on the ship. They're on, trying to find May, and the hole goes through his room, and and, uh,
Yeah.
and he's like, "Yeah, I'm okay, but there's a hole all the way through my room now, so this is kind of uncool. Thanks for telling me to get my suit."
Oh well, wait. That's in the book, isn't it?
Oh, it didn't happen in the show? I know I read it in the book, yes.
Okay,
There
yeah,
is a similar scene in the show where like Praxis and Amos are strapped in across from each other, and Praxis failed to secure something properly, so when the ship gets hit, something comes loose and very
right.
nearly
Mm.
like impales him.
Oh
Yeah,
gosh.
they were is right before they were going into I forget who. Oh, they were going in to rescue Avasarala and Bobby on the Razorback,
Yeah.
and and Prax failed to completely secure one of the tool drawers, and that's where you got all this crap. Again, and an illustration of that physics is real out here. Um, Alex is flipping the ship around trying to battle incoming missiles. Meanwhile, down in the tool shop, there's drills and cutting instruments and big tools flying around there, and Amos is trying to crawl across the way to save Prax, and he does that Neo like grab of that drill just as it's heading toward his face.
Yeah,
Oh
I
man.
my that's honestly that is one of my favorite scenes in the entire show because the situation with Bobby and Abasarala, you're like, yeah, that's
Mm.
tense, but I know they're going to be fine. This is not the place where they kill them off. It would make no sense narratively. However, scroll like scroll down, look down to this other scene. The tensest thing that's going on
Uh-huh.
isn't the space dogfight. It's the situation, the absolute mess of a situation of Amos desperately trying to keep
Yeah,
Prax from getting impaled by the tools he didn't secure.
yeah, for sure.
Um, that being said, it is about time to wrap things up. I know I feel like all of us could probably keep going about this for hours. So
Yeah,
I'll make that executive decision. It could be my fault that we have to stop.
no problem.
So just in case you hadn't caught this yet, audience, really, really good show. Please go and watch it. If it when the inevitable, say the next inevitable petition comes for a revival, sign it. You know, read the books. I'm going to at some point, I've decided. It might not be for a while because I have a very long list of other things I have to get through, but I'm planning to as well. It's a very, very masterfully crafted story, and I'm very pleased that Keith and Andy put me onto it for this episode because otherwise it was on my radar anyway, but otherwise I may
Mhm.
never have got around to it because a lot of things are on my radar, you know. But yeah, so until then, you can find if you're listening to this episode on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere else, you can, of course, also find it on my site, radfordwrites.com. I also share stories there, including a little sprinkling of sci-fi. You can find articles I've written there as well as links to buy my books there, which I appreciate people doing because it makes it easier for me to keep doing this as well. And you can find Keith and Andy on their podcast, the Brockton Bay Chronicles, where they have been chronicling their journey through the story of Worm, and you know I love that.
For sure. And we're looking forward to having you join us on our roundtable discussion here in the not too distant future.
Oh, yeah, although by the with my schedule, the way my episodes are scheduled, that'll probably be up a ways before this. But there you have it. Yes, go and consume their stuff as well because they are excellent at this podcasting thing.
Well, thanks very much for having us back, Daniel. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you, and I'll talk about sci-fi or world building anytime. It's always fun.
Right, see you later then.